Hello again, and welcome to the second part of the Endora trilogy. If you haven't had the chance to watch the first video, where I created the floating city using the magic of Photoshop, I highly recommend clicking the card in the upper right corner before watching this one. But even if not, I hope you learn something new and enjoy it on the way. Before I proceed to the good stuff, if you like my content, I'd like to remind you to give this video a thumbs up and subscribe if you feel like I've earned it. Also, by all means, use the comment section if you want to ask some questions or give me your insights. The YouTube algorithm is a tough opponent, and I need all the help I can get in that fight. Now that that's been dealt with, we can move on to what you came here for. I instantly knew that I was going to use the leather corset, but obviously it needed some proper cleanup since the model had her hair on the side of it. I copied the upper left side to the right and adjusted it to fit the model. Her cleavage needed some cleanup as well, even though I later realized that having her breasts exposed was totally pointless, so it finally ended up being covered in chainmail. While writing the script for this video, I realized how cool the bracelet on the model was. I could have used it, but I was so focused on the corset that the bracelet went under the radar. The chains on the bottom of the corset were also missing, so I just copied the ones from above and transformed them using warp to fit. You can see that I used the high-key image of that gentle-looking woman against the large window frame as a reference for all the different elements of the character design. I thought that I was gonna use the part of the dress that she's holding, but with the limited time that I had, I ditched the idea later, since I realized that it would be hell to animate. For the face, I used this beauty shot since I needed it to be as clear as possible. After masking it and removing the earrings, I placed the head in its proper place and proceeded to work on the details. I used this metal plate sort of thingy for the neck piece, and I kept returning to it so many times because I didn't like how it looked. Needless to say, in the end, I decided to scrap it. The gong was a perfect fit for a shield-like object that I imagined would go on her back as a part of some sort of mechanism that the goddess would carry behind. I had no other reasoning behind that mechanism other than that it would look cool in the animation. And since the setting is steampunk, it basically justifies any mechanical contraption that I had the idea to incorporate. I just erased the legible words on the shield and left the rune-like inscription. Having it on the gong was such a happy accident and a very cool detail in the end. I used this image of an old vending machine to create a belt. Not much to it really. A little warp and it did the trick. I did come back to it later since it needed some perspective tweaking, but it served as a placeholder for the time being. For her headpiece, I used the same gate as the one in the city. I kinda had the idea that it would be a monument to her holy symbol or something. I tried putting this picture frame behind her as another element, but it ended up looking kinda pointless and too out of place. Though I did take those nice shoulder pads that fit like a charm. I tried to use the armor further, however, I didn't quite like how it looked. I remember that I had a photo of a chainmail from a Renaissance fair that I visited a few years back, and that one did the trick. After a little bit of warping and masking, I found its rightful place on Endora's upper arms. I did try to use it on the forearms as well, but it just didn't work. I also tried using the naked arm instead, but I realized that I needed to rethink my approach. So I asked my old friend the internet for some more images, and lo and behold, my prayers were answered. I found this awesome Victorian model on freepik.com whose hands were just in the right position, and the lace sleeves ended up giving her that much needed softness in contrast to the warrior side. And this is the part where I decided that the neck piece had to go. When in doubt, use more chainmail. This is also the part where I decided that it's utterly pointless to expose her cleavage, since everything else was chainmailed. Well, what do you know, I just came up with a new word. Now, that looked more like it. The idea from the very beginning was to use some pointy things such as blades to create the feeling of her being an evil entity. So I used a stock image of a sword that's been around in my asset folder for a while and created her back piece. I was finally happy with how everything looked. However, the red dress stood out, so I used the only logical solution and made everything black. I only left the lace trim in its original color, even though it eventually didn't even end up in the final piece. It was time for some color correction. I had to make her face paler, since originally she was an Aasimar. For those of you who don't know what it is, a brief version would be that they're a race from D&D. Basically, human-like creatures with some godly characteristics, such as pupilless eyes, silver hair, pale skin, etc. But check the link in the video description if you want to learn more. Now, since I wanted to make her overall look feel old, I used a parchment texture to create a rust-like effect on her chainmail armor and later on her crown, shoulder pads and blades behind her. You'll get to see the whole thing come together later in the video, and to make her look more magical, I created a glowing effect on the shield. And this is the part where I realized that her expression is too happy, and she needed to look more menacing. So I used the liquify filter to make her features more pointy and her expression more angry. I also applied some dark makeup for good measure, and after looking at the image for a while, I realized that a gem on her crown could be a very good addition to the whole image. And I finally created the look that I was aiming for. Strong but gentle, beautiful but menacing, calm but vengeful. A little bit of trivia. This is the point where I sent the image to my friend Filip, the composer of the album and the brain behind the whole Endora story. Once he saw it, he immediately got the inspiration for the final track. It felt so nice to finally return the favor after being inspired by his work for years now. And that's the track playing in the background that you're listening to right now. I then moved on to creating shadows and highlights on every piece of her apparel and equipment until everything ended up in nice shades of brown and blue. Once that was finally over, I moved on to making Endora fit the scene. It took a lot of color correction, painting, adding effects and so on. Keep in mind that I couldn't just apply a single effect on top of the whole image because almost each individual element needed to be prepped for the animation later on. Now, before I continue going further into my thought process, I'll let you enjoy this bit with some music from the Endora Unleashed album. You'll find the link to the album and all the related links in the description below the video. At first, I had the idea to make her look more like a menacing silhouette behind the city, but I lost so much detail in that process that it didn't make any sense to leave it like that. So I lessened the color correction and created some rim light everywhere I saw fit. Oh yeah, I realized that I didn't record the bit where I painted her eyes completely white and erased the bottom of her skirt. I hope you forgive me for that. After a few more tweaks here and there, the piece was finally ready for the animation. Therefore, make sure to subscribe to this channel so as not to miss the final part of the Endora trilogy next Sunday. Also, give this video a thumbs up to help me fight the YouTube algorithm. And by all means, leave a comment if you have a thought to share or a question to ask. Until next time, this is Crafty, and I bid you farewell.